Today's episode of the Kwibuka Podcast covers 5th to 8th of May, where radio stations continued broadcasting messages inciting the increased killings of Tutsis and sharing updates of killings taking places across the country. RTLM's hateful radio programs were denounced in a statement issued by Human Rights Watch on May 5, 1994. Although some UN Security Council non-permanent member states proposed strengthening military presence in Rwanda, several permanent members rejected the idea. Details of major massacres at schools and orphanages demonstrate the deeply personal betrayal that characterized the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. May 5, 1994. The genocidal government efforts to speed up the killings where Tutsis were yet to be killed and massacres of Tutsis at Sovu Monastery. RTLM declared that the killings of the remaining Tutsis should be accelerated. On May 5, 1994, radio RTLM broadcasted a series of messages and speeches urging all Hutu power leaders, political leaders, military, gendarmerie, Interahamwe, and Impuzamugambi to speed up their efforts and kill Tutsis wherever they were. Each radio message was followed by Simone Bichindi's song aimed at stirring the minds of killers. RTLM reporters also broadcasted messages from all over the country about the status of killings and acknowledging the work being done by killers through massacring the so-called accomplices of the enemy, that's to say, Tutsis. The most popular journalists for Kinyarwanda programs were Noel Hitimana, Habimana Kantano, Valerie Bemerici, and Gaspard Gahigi. The RTLM journalists who used the French language to mobilize killers to speed up the extermination of Tutsis were Emmanuel Ngomati, Philippe Mbirizi, Joel Hachizimana, and Georges Regueux. RTLM was reinforced by Radio Rwanda during the programs hosted by Jean-Baptiste Bamwanga and in various messages delivered by extremist journalists from Radio Rwanda, including Frodoir Naurikura, Augustin Hatari, Focus Fashaho, Robert Simba, and others. On that same day, Human Rights Watch issued a statement denouncing RTLM's radio programs in which they were calling for the immediate extermination of Tutsis across the country. The monastery of the Benedictine Sisters is located in Hue district at Sovu. As of April 17, 1994, more than 10,000 Tutsis had taken refuge in various buildings of the monastery, including the clinic, but they were killed in various groupings. On April 22, 1994, Tutsi refugees at Sovu were attacked 3 times. The Interahamwe first attacked those who had taken refuge at the health center, and they fled into its garage. Interahamwe decided to burn them alive in the garage. Sisters Gertrude, Consolata Mukangango, and Sisters Chizito, Julienne Mukabutera, who were 42 and 36 years in 1994 respectively, brought 2 jerrycans of fuel that was used. Sister Chizito poured the fuel in front of the garage and set it on fire. About 7,000 Tutsis died that day. Sister Chizito had their list, and then she checked if all of them were dead. On April 25, 1994, the leaders of Interahamwe from Sovu, Emmanuel de Chiraho, his deputy Gaspard Rusanganwa alias Nyiramatwi, and other Interahamwe militia returned at the monastery to kill the remaining Tutsis who were hiding inside the monastery. Sisters Gertrude and Sister Chizito spoke to the Chiraho and told him to help them get rid of the refugees because they no longer had food for them. The refugees begged to be saved, but Sister Gertrude instructed to kill them. Interahamwe killed approximately 1,000 Tutsis that day. Approximately 30 people, relatives of Tutsi sisters, remained in the monastery. Sister Gertrude put a lot of pressure on her fellow sisters and ordered them to get rid of their relatives, otherwise they would all be killed with them. However, the sisters refused. On May 5, 1994, Sister Gertrude wrote a letter to Jonathan Remesha, the mayor of Hue Commune, urging him to come and force out all the Tutsi refugees. The letter read, Subject: Appeal to the authorities. Mr. Bourgmestre of Hue Commune, Utare. Mr. Bourgmestre, in recent weeks, some people have come to Sovu Monastery as regular visitors for less than a week, most of them on official missions, while others had come to rest or pray. However, there are others who have unexpectedly come following the start of the war that has been ravaging, and they do not want to leave. In addition, we don't have enough resources to support them. I've been asking for days for the communal authorities to come and order them to go back home or go elsewhere they want to live, because here in the monastery we do not have any resources left. I strongly request you, Mr. Bourgmestre, to help us address the matters not later than May 6, 1994, so that we can resume the usual work of the monastery without any disturbance. May God protect you. Head of Sovu Monastery, Sir Gertrude Consolata Mukangango, and her signature. On May 6, 1994, Bourgmestre Rumesha brought police officers and Interahamwe to kill the Tutsi refugees who are still at Sovu Monastery. Hence, they were killed on the same day that Sister Gertrude had specified in her letter to Bourgmestre Rumesha, requesting him to force all Tutsis out so that the monastery could continue with its work. Sister Gertrude's trial took place in Belgium in 2001. She revealed that she was the one who went to show Interahamwe the rooms where the Tutsis were hiding in the monastery. Tutsis killed in Sovu included mainly those from Abaha clan, which lived near the monastery. All of them were massacred with their families, and many were employees of Sovu Monastery for many years. Some of the killers who assisted Sister Gertrude and Kizito in the Sovu massacres include Adjudant Emmanuel Rekeraho, Joseph Habyarimana, who fled to France, Gaspard Rusanganwa alias Nyiramatwi, Innocent Nyundo, Pierre Rushyana, Jean Maniraho, Etienne Rugombyi Mugabo, Theoneste Kagina, Joseph Bizimana, who was the brigadier of Huye Commune, and their high-ranked leader was Burgomestre Jonathan Uremesha. Sister Gertrude was sentenced to 15 years in prison in Belgium, while Sister Kizito was sentenced to 12 years in prison. They were released after completing their sentences, and they now live in Maredre Monastery in Belgium. After her release, Sister Gertrude returned to the Benedictine Monastery in Maredre near Namur city in Belgium. With the support of French journalist Jérôme Castaldi, Sister Gertrude wrote a book in 2018 entitled Rwanda 1994, La Parole de Sœur Gertrude, meaning Rwanda 1994, the words of Sister Gertrude. This book demeans the history of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, criticizes the justice system, and strongly targets genocide survivors who had testified about her role in the massacres that took place in Sovu. The witnesses included her fellow sisters of Sovu Monastery. The negative attitude of Sister Gertrude was widely condemned by many, including her fellow colleagues. One of them, Kayitesi Bernadette, who lived with Sister Gertrude at Sovu Monastery. After reading the latter's book, Kayitesi wrote a testimony entitling The Truth of the Genocide History in general and the role played by Sister Gertrude in the massacres of Tutsis who had taken refuge in Sovu. May 6, 1994. Interahamwe were mobilized to continue the genocide, and the UN abandoned Tutsis who are being massacred. The Prime Minister, Jean Kambanda, on Radio Rwanda, urged the Interahamwe to accelerate the killings. We have men, ammunitions, a united government, a united army, and we have to win. Everyone must be armed. It is the government's priority to ensure that there are enough weapons, even if this prevents the importation of other goods. Prime Minister Jean Kambanda, speaking from Kibuye. On this date, Radio Rwanda rebroadcasted the full speech from May 3rd, 1994 by Jean Kambanda, while he was in Kibuye Prefecture, where he had requested the acceleration of killings in the whole country and in Kibuye in particular. On May 6, 1994, UN non-permanent member states, Spain, New Zealand, Argentina, and Czech Republic, proposed a plan to strengthen military presence in Rwanda. However, some countries with a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council rejected the idea but suggested that Rwanda's problems should be dealt by the African Union Organization, OAU. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Boutros Ghali, wrote to the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, the incumbent president of the organization. President Mubarak wrote to the OAU Secretary General, Salim Ahmed Salim, and requested that African countries should find troops to send to Rwanda. Salim Ahmed Salim told President Mubarak that Africa could not cope with the kind of massacres which were ongoing in Rwanda. Rather, the United Nations had the power to use its political influence and seek the much-needed support for action in Rwanda. He added that whenever such problems arose, the proposed method was the one used to find a fitting solution. During the first week of May, ICRC personnel from Kigali, Byumba, Gisenyi, Kabgayi, and Kibungo tried to take care of the injured and patients who had been threatened by Interahamwe and the government soldiers. The head of ICRC, Cornelio Semaruga, spoke to Philip Gillard, who represented ICRC in Rwanda. He published an article in the International Herald Tribune denouncing media and governments that did not report on the massacres of Tutsis, saying that all countries were implicated. Gillard sent assistance to about 30,000 refugees who had fled massacres in Gitarama, but they were surrounded by Interahamwe who were about to kill them. Refugees were provided with some basic needs. The Interahamwe continued to kidnap and kill some of the refugees, as well as raping Tutsi women. May 7th, 1994. Massacres perpetrated against the Tutsi in the former Gikongoro and Gitarama prefectures. On April 8th, 1994, as Tutsis started to flee in big numbers to Kwibuka Catholic Church, students at Groupe Scolaire Marie Merci were wondering what was happening. They got informed on April 10th, 11th, and 14th, 1994, when Tutsis who had taken refuge at the church got killed. The students then knew that the same fate was awaiting them. In the days that followed, local authorities sent gendarmes at the school to protect students. However, the school principal, Father Emmanuel Wayezu, had been meeting with some teachers, namely Hormisidas Fatikaramu and François Xavier Kaigamba, as well as some Hutu students who had left the school campus at night to meet with Burugumestre Charles Nyirindandi to plot the killings of the Tutsi students. During the night of April 30th, 1994, Hutu students started to speculate that Tutsis were about to get killed. On May 1st, 1994, 10 Tutsi students, 9 boys and 1 girl, discovered the plan and decided to flee to Burundi in the same night. When the news broke that they had fled, gendarmes surrounded the school so that no one else could escape. On May 2nd, 1994, Father Waezi Emmanuel held a meeting with the students and told them that fleeing was dangerous since Tutsis who were caught fleeing at night were killed at Takavuguto River and their bodies were being used to block roads in the area. From then onwards, none of the remaining Tutsi students even tried to flee again. With the aim of wreaking havoc in the school and spreading hatred among students, on May 4th, 1994, Tutsi students were falsely accused of poisoning porridge to kill their Hutu colleagues. The latter organized riots, blowing whistles, and refused to eat the porridge, insisting that it had been poisoned. They also announced that they were leaving the school to their Tutsi colleagues. Hutu students then rushed to another school opposite Marie Merci, Collège des Lettres, currently Mère du Verbe, implementing their well-crafted plan of leaving the Tutsi students alone at Groupe Scolaire Marie Merci to be killed. Father Uwayezu and some gendarmes followed the Hutu students to persuade them to return to Marie Merci because their belongings were still there. They agreed that they would return if there was no Tutsi students left at the school. Therefore, Tutsi students were taken to École des Lettres, while their Hutu colleagues returned to Groupe Scolaire Marie Merci. When the Tutsi students arrived at the Collège des Lettres, the nun who was running the school, Pierre de Véronnet, refused to give them dormitories and put them in the dining hall where they slept on the floor without food or beddings. That situation could have caused the Tutsi students to flee, also considering that they had been receiving information from outside. However, on May 4th, 1994, the Groupe Scolaire Marie Merci principal, Father Wayezu Emmanuel, and gendarmes used a so-called consolation meeting to comfort them. In fact, the meeting was used to trick them into believing that they were safe at École des Lettres. Also present at the meeting were the former prefect of Gikongoro Prefecture, Buchibaruta Laurent, the sous-prefect of Munini Sous-Prefecture, Biniga Damien, Bishop Misago Augustin of Gikongoro Diocese, the Burugumestre of Rwamiko Commune, Silas Munyurangabo, the Burugumestre of Mubuga Commune, Nyirindandi Charles, the commander of Mubuga Gendarmerie, Second Lieutenant Hitimana Nakli, and other officials from the prefecture, Mubuga and Rwamiko communes. The prefect asked the students' representative to express their problems. The latter explained that apart from fearing to be killed as they were always told, they were concerned by the fact that they were far from their families and they were not even sure that their relatives were still alive. The students' representatives added that if the leaders wanted them to leave, they would leave, and if they wanted to let them be killed, they would be killed. According to survivors from the school, Bishop Misago and Prefect Buchibaruta told the Tutsi students that the reason why the Hutu students had chosen to separate from them was that they no longer trusted their Tutsi colleagues because the latter spent their nights listening to Inkotanyi songs on Radio Muhabura and that they could poison them. On May 7th, 1994, between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., Interahamwe from various parts of the country, including Rwamiko, Mubuga, Ndago, and elsewhere, attacked students with various weapons and started killing them. Those who managed to escape were hunted down by dogs. Some of those in hiding were discovered by their Hutu colleagues who revealed their whereabouts to be killed. Interahamwe wore dried green banana leaves, while all Hutu students from Groupe Scolaire Marie Merci wore red scarves so that they could be easily identified. Some of the Hutu students had weapons which they used to kill and torture their classmates. The Tutsi students were first asked to kill each other, while the killers promised that those who will have killed their fellows would be spared. Before they were killed, the Tutsi students were asked to take their clothes off. The killers, together with some Hutu students, looked and hunted down the Tutsi students who were hiding in different places. Elias and Fidel Castro from Ruhango, who were hiding in the ceiling, were discovered. Castro was tortured and buried alive, leaving his head uncovered and killing him later. The victims of the genocide at the École des Lettres were thrown into a pit behind the chapel. Father Uwayezu Emmanuel, who was the director of Groupe Scolaire Marie Merci, lives in Italy, where he has changed his name to Emmanuel Mihigo Uwayezu. The prefect of Gikongoro Bukibaruta Laurent fled to France, and he was initially prosecuted by the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, and his case file was transferred to France, but he is yet to be brought to justice. There was also Biniga Damien, Munini sous-préfet. Hitimana Anakle, in charge of gendarmerie in Mubuga. Bakunduchize Innocent, who was the plantation manager in Matati factory, and Nyirindandi Charles, the burgomaster of Mubuga commune. Additionally, there were Ndabayinze Juvenal, the director of Matati factory, Mutezihana Nathaniel, the director of Tibeo Health Center, Kaigamba François, the director of studies, Karichizi Fabien, alias Sagazi, who was the prefect of discipline, Fatikaramu Hormisidas, geography teacher, Seraphine, who was the English teacher, and Kimbo, who worked in the kitchen. Students who were involved in the killings: Murindabagabo Aimable, Jiringiro Theoneste alias Kofi, Harorimana Alexis alias Jifu, who was the student representative, head boy, Hakizimana Jean Dodier alias Rukokoma, Jean Damascene Sengyumva, Misago Venuste, Nakabonye Alexis, Aaron Mundanikure, Michael Mutabazi, and Hakizimana Jean Damascene alias Gahinda. Uwamahoro Clement, son of Mutaziana Nathaniel, Kazmir Bizimungu, Butera Christophe, Esperance Nyiranziza, Jocelyn Yukusenje, Lucien, young brother of the prefect of discipline, Nsabimana Sylvestre, Barinda Janvier, Serushema Jean Bosco, Baragamba Edouard were also involved. Lastly, there were Uwimana Emmanuel, Gaudence Uwamahoro, Solange Uwamahoro, daughter of Rubanda, Bimenyimana Jean Damascene, Nirora Mélanie, Habinshuti François Xavier, Twahirwa Gérard, Harerimana Gared, Karerangabo Viateur, Munyarukiko François, Vuguziga Egide, Ndayambaje Eraste, and many others. On May 6, 1994, the burgomaster of Kigoma Commune, Ugirashebuja Celestin, held a meeting in Remera sector, Kigoma Commune. It was held at a field commonly known as CCF. During the meeting, he said that peace had been restored and that every Hutu hid Tutsis should let them go back home and register them with Councillor Mushorangabo. After the meeting, many Tutsis came out of hiding thinking everything had gone back to normal. On May 7, 1994, early in the morning, a group of killers arrived at around 4 a.m., led by Rubagumya François, Silas alias Gahiri, Ngarambe, Gaspard, Esdras, Kanyandekwe, and many other murderers from Nyamazi, Mhanga, and Chinyinya headed to Rwabuhungu's Matthias house to gather all Tutsis who are from the surrounding areas. The latter included Mukamanzi Kostazi and her daughter Kairangwa Tasien. They were escorted to the Adventist church nearby. On the way to the church, the killers passed by Vizima Anastasia's house and took Mrs. Kabairo, Marisiana, and her daughter Gasengaire Agnes with her 2 children. At the church, a large group of Tutsis from the clan of Abazuwa had been gathered, and the Interahamwe militia started killing them. They killed 130 Tutsis. After killing them, the killers continued in Katiro, at Gasinzigwa Hogasien's house, and killed his wife, Mukanyarwaya Immaculée, and his 3 children. The killers were supported by Gatabazi Philippe, a businessman who was transporting their traditional weapons in his red van. The killers continued on their way to Nhinda, which was inhabited by Tutsis from Abagamba and Abanyoni clans. When they arrived in Hinda, they were joined by other groups of killers from all the hills around Hinda, namely Remera, Mhanga, Nyamazi, Nyakabuye, Rushoka, Mukingo, and Gatagara. It was early in the morning. The killers were led by Gakuba, who was highly involved in the massacres. They included Kamonyo, Gatoya, Frederick, and many others. They started from the home of an old man at Anaz, where they killed 39 Tutsis who had sought refuge there. They continued to the home of an old man, Rukangarajoro François, where they slaughtered 36 Tutsis. While some of the killers were killing Tutsis at Rukangarajoro's home, others launched an attack at the home of an old man known as Mutuhurana Alex. Everyone present at his home was terrified. They were all holding young children in their arms. The Ineramwe militia rounded them up, took them to a place where they were all slaughtered. At Rukangarajoro François' house, there were cries, children crying, others apologizing, saying, "Forgive us, we'll never do it again." The killers started killing Tutsis who were at Mutuhurana's home, and when they realized that there was a big number and that some of them could escape, they decided to take them to Alois's house and hacked them to death one by one. Their bodies were dumped at Alois's and François' toilet pits. The killers later went to the house of Munyabitare Etienne and found 18 Tutsis, including an old man, his wife, Mukamajoro Marguerite, the wife of Munyabitare Bernard, called Bamurange Primitiva, and their children, namely Uwineza César, Umugwaneza Solange, Munyabugingo Aristide, and Shumbusho Dominique Regis. The children of Placide Rutyahana, who had sought refuge at Munyabitare's house, namely Germain Busoro, Micho Myiza, Olivier Mugisha, John Rutaisire, also known as Bebe, were killed in the backyard. A total of 16 Tutsis were killed, 3 buried alive, 2 of them died instantly. 1 child was rescued by a domestic worker. When Bernard Munyabitare, who had been hiding on top of the house, realized that they had killed his entire family, he came down from his hiding and surrendered himself to the killers. He was killed at Ikatiro roadblock by François, the son of Ngundimandwa, the leader of Nyamazi cell. On Mount Nhinda, a total of 200 Tutsis perished. Only 4 children and a pregnant lady survived. On May 7, 1994, a group of killers from Mukingo went to Gatagara, where they joined the local killers in slaughtering women and children and throwing them into a pit at Modeste Mohiza's house. Those killed included Mukaremera Marie and Alphonsine Mukagatare and their children, namely Mohiza Omer, Mohiza Clément, Mohiza Roger, Zaninga Rosette, also known as Kiki, Uwera Emilienne, Mohiza Emery, Umuhire Aimé, also known as Poussette, and Umuhire Jessica. After killing them, the killers went chanting that the father of the nation, Habyarimana, had slept over men and had to cover himself with women. On May 7, 1994, Tutsis in Remera experienced another attack. The attack, which came from Baragansa when they had been slaughtering cows in Nyanza, was led by Nzigimfura Vincent, Sebatkware, brother to Rugumestre Ugirashebuja Celestin, and Antoine Nhari, who took over Remera Hill, wearing banana leaves and marching with many dogs. They killed many Tutsis from Abanyakarama community, including Diana Musango Joseph, Kaitare Jean, Mugorewera Françoise, Nibarere Laetitia, Kaboyi Habiyakare Clément, Kaboyi Hakuzimana Clémence, Mukamusoni Bertha, Musare Bernard, Umugwaneza Veneranda, Uwimana Claire, Mbonyi Judith, Umurungi Letitia, Uwineza Assumpta, Mpinganzima Assumpta, Uwirora Benjamin, Habimana Deogracias, Nzigimfura Martin, Mukarutamu Gaudence, Kabarisa Augustin, Uwimana Immaculée, Mukakabayiza Atanazi, Dadine and Simba. They also killed Tutsis of Gasonga Nebyi, Mudahindurwa Elias's family. The old man had provided residency for Mutkwa, Ugirashebuja's father. Their homes were opposite one another. The attack was led by Sebatkware, and all were found at Gasonga Nebyi's home and were killed using clubs. Those who were killed included Gasonga Nebyi Mudahindurwa Elias, Nyirankezi Marguerite, Mugore Windekwe Antoinette, Mukakazina Concessa, Uwera Yvonne, Mugisha Yves, Dieudonné, Mukamusoni Oda, Mukamana Emma Marie, Rwakazina Emmanuel, his wife, Mukarugina Immaculée, and their children, Njirabanyiginya Dominique, Mudahindwa Narcisse, Ruhanga Sylvestre, Mugiraneza Rwakazina Albert, Umubyeyi Rwakazina Letitia, and Gahaya Rwakazina Basile. Their lifeless bodies were thrown into a pit latrine. After some time, the killers remembered that Mugorewindeko Antoinette had a heart support device. They came back, took her body out of the pit latrine, and cut it open to remove the device. Tutsis that were killed at the roadblock controlled by Gihana Anisette near Rusanganwa's place included Musonera Augustin, Muteshimana Tanazi, the wife of Mnyankindi Samuel called Marine, and their children Mutoni, Belize, and also Christine, the wife of Elias Kamhayana, Karori and his wife Grace, and their 2 children, Kamhana's daughter-in-law, Umurisa, and her son, Buchana Anakli, Mushimimana, and Mugabo. They were thrown into a huge pit that Jehovah had dug initially supposed to serve as toilets. The perpetrators of the massacres included Udia Shebuja Celestin, who was the burgomaster of Kigoma Commune, Kagwa André, who worked at the Gatagara Disability Center and was in charge of the Department of Rehabilitation for the Disabled, Brother Rutihunza Jean-Baptiste, who was the head of Gatagara Center, brothers of Udia Shebuja Celestin, Mushorangabo, who was the councillor of Remera Sector, Nzijimfura Vincent Rurangwa, who was the councillor of Manga Sector, Nzakamwita Japhet, a businessman, Gatabazi Philippe, a businessman, and many others. 7th to 8th May 1994. Genocide against orphan Tutsi children at Village d'Enfants SOS Gikongoro. The SOS Center at Gikongoro was run by Venuste Nyombaire from the former Byumba Prefecture. It sheltered some children who are being raised there, including Tutsi children. On the night of May 7th to 8th, 1994, selected Tutsi orphans were killed. Prior to running the center, Mr. Nyombaire was the deputy director of the SOS Center in Gikongoro, where he had been deployed by the Ministry of Local Government from Kigali Prefecture. Nyombaire was brought to Gikongoro as a cover for all allegations against him about his role in the Bugesera massacres, where he worked as an official of the former Ministère de l'Intérieur et Développement Communal during the massacres of Tutsis that took place in March 1992. He was sent from SOS Gikongoro from Ministère de l'Intérieur et du Développement Communal by Munyengabe Marcel, who was the CEO of SOS on the national level and was among prominent Interahamwe in Kachiru. As soon as he arrived in Gikongoro, Mr. Nyombaire did his best to get a top leadership position at the SOS Gikongoro. He planned attacks against the director of the center, Mark Kirirwahandi, a Hutu from the PSD opposition party, until he was severely wounded with a grenade on April 8, 1994. Mark Kirirwahandi, who did not support the genocide plot from PSD, he was not part of the Hutu power faction of the party. He decided to flee from Gikongoro to his home in Butare, Mbazi commune. He was wounded by Nsengumuremyi Alphonse, an employee of Electrogaz Gikongoro, who was part of the killers. After Kirirwahandi's escape, Venuste Nyombaire took over as the director of SOS and started to organize the killings of whoever he wanted. Venuste Nyombaire became a member of the extremist group in Gikongoro composed of people from various establishments in Gikongoro Prefecture. Members were mostly Bachiga from Ruhengeri, Gisenyi, and Byumba, who had been part of polling of the genocide. SOS Gikongoro had many spacious buildings in a quiet place, which they thought would be used to host genocide preparation meetings and other activities relating to the preparation of the massacres. The extremist group consisted of Prefet Buchibaruta Laurent, Sous-Préfet Frodouard Havugimana, Colonel Simba Alois, Burgomestre of Nyamagabe Felicien Semakwavu, Ndereye Charles Naonhuye from Ruhengeri, who was in charge of the Agricultural Development Project in Gikongoro, PDAG, before his transfer to Isaiah Ruona, currently living in the Netherlands. There were also Celestin Mutabaruka, who headed the Agriculture and Livestock Project on the border with Crete Zaire Nil, CZN, now living in the UK. Captain Faustin Sebuhura, who was the deputy commander of the Gendarmerie in Gikongoro from Ruhengeri, died. Dennis Kamodoka, who was in charge of the Matati factory from Mutura commune in Gisenyi. Juvenal Ndabarinze, who was in charge of Chitabi tea factory from Ngumba commune in Ruhengeri. Semibigabo Selze, who was the prosecutor of Gikongoro prefecture. Additionally, Justin Airugari from Ruhengeri, who was in charge of electrogas in Gikongoro. Fabien Uimana, who was in charge of investigation. Innocent Tangishaka worked at Migration Office. Rurangwa Joseph, who ran the CPDFP Training Center, were part of the extremist group too. Furthermore, Damien Biniga, Joseph Nejeinwari, and Joachim Hategekimana, the sous-prefet of Munini, Karaba, and Kadua sous-prefecture, respectively. David Karanga, who was the registrar of Gikongoro Court, and others were also members of the group. The above-mentioned gang planned how the genocide was going to be carried out in Gikongoro Prefecture, and Nyombaire joined the group around 1992. Most staff of SOS Gikongoro were Hutus, with a few Tutsis occupying lower positions. On the night of May 7th to 8th, 1994, Nyombaire Venus brought in Hamwe attackers at OSOS and killed children in collaboration with Kabarere Venancy, who was their teacher and has been convicted of genocide crimes by Gacaca Court, serving her sentence in Nyamagabe prison. Venus Nyombaire opened the room in which children were gathered, and they were all slaughtered. About 10 children were killed. There were also 8 children from Kigali, SOS Kachiru, who are said to have fled the fighting and brought to Gikongoro SOS. 6 of them were selected as Tutsis and were killed. These children were selected by Nyombaire and were put in a separate classroom around May 6, 1994. And apparently, he knew the plot to kill them in due course. On the evening of May 7, 1994, Nyombaire selected a 12-year-old girl among the orphans and handed her over to an Interahamwe called Zindana to thank him for the killings of the children, and gave him the right to rape her all night before killing her the next day. According to a testimony from Kabarere Venancy, who was involved in the killings of the children, Ernestine, Helene, and Jensen are some of the names of the victims she could remember. That night, after the killers had killed the children, they also killed SOS Tutsi staff who were on duty. That night, a security guard called Nyirimirera was killed. They also attacked his home and killed his wife and 4 children. Further, they killed a gardener called Ntaganda Pierre. The attackers included Ndiramie Boniface, Mbigizembishaka Jean, Kanyamanza Damascene, Athanase, Mark, and others. Children and Tutsi staff were killed by Interahamwe attackers brought by Venus Nyombaire. The militia was composed by Munyangoga, who was the security guard at Electrogas Gikongoro, Sengumiremi Alphonse, who also worked at Electrogas and one of the Interahamwe leaders in Gikongoro, Kanyamanza Jean Damascene, Habarurema Fidel, Kachira Ildefonse, and Habineza alias Mapendu. There were also Rusatsi Juvenal, Anastase alias Ruhabana, Gasana, son of Nyamwasa, Nyamuhene Vianney, Gasimba François, son of Nyarugwe, Ndaisaba alias Chinongo, Nahayo Elise, Ruberamanzi Innocent, Utazi Rubanda Emmanuel, Msabyimana alias Bisabo, Hashakimana, and Mungwarareba. The militia was brought from Gatyazo Business Center by Nyombaire, and they were led by Munyangoga Felicien. On October 16, 2009, Venus Nyombaire was sentenced by Gacaca Court in Nyagasaka sector to life imprisonment in absentia. Bernard Kouchner came to Kigali from 12th to 16th May 1994 to advocate for the evacuation of the orphans by UNAMIR to France. The negotiations failed on May 16, 1994, because the Interahamwe militia opposed the idea. Bernard Kouchner traveled to Gitarama, where he met with Prime Minister Jean Kambanda and President Sindi Kubgabo on May 15, 1994. He wanted to help save orphans by evacuating them to France. Thank you for listening to another episode of Kwibuka Podcast. As always, make sure you leave us a review, sharing what you like about the podcast, and share with others who would be interested in listening.